All you have to do is realize that these people he's talking about, Osama bin Laden and similar people, they really actually believe what they say they believe. And once you can grasp that, everything else follows.
I think the atheist critique of religion for doing violent things was very easy in the 19th century. You look back at the Spanish Inquisition and things like that. But I think we stand at the dawn of the 21st century, and we have seen what institutionalized atheism did in the 20th century. That doesn't prove there is a God, doesn't prove there's not a God. I think it simply proves that as human beings, we need to be intensely responsible about any ideology and its impact on the way in which we live. There need to be limits, and I think that's one of the most important outcomes of our discussion this morning.
Yes, I agree with a lot of that. I must object once again to the phrase institutionalized atheism. I mean, Stalin was pushing institutionalized Marxism. He happened to be an atheist. Hitler was pushing, well, goodness knows, I mean, some sort of vague sub-Wagnerian private religion of his own. He never actually formally renounced his Roman Catholicism, and he sometimes invoked it in his more virulently anti-Semitic speeches. But I wouldn't wish to claim Hitler was religious, nor would I wish to claim Hitler or Stalin were institutionalized atheism. It is certainly true that there are other ideologies which have caused hideous deaths and destruction and torture and are deeply, deeply evil. Faith in the wrong hands is to be added to that list. Atheism is not, because it was incidental to what Hitler and Stalin did, not a deeply integral part of their worldview.
I hear your objections to the phrase institutionalized atheism, but in response I would want to say that atheism is not a sort of add-on belief for a Marxist. It's core. It's a central explanatory theme, and also leads to the Marxist program of wanting to eliminate religion by force when it did not decline as the theory said it would. So we may have a difference here about what words we use, but I would simply want to say again that the history of the 20th century shows that even atheism, which can be benign, even positive in some contexts, can end up mimicking the worst of religion in its certain contexts. And therefore, again, I say, the real issue is human nature. When we see a worldview that inspires us, that makes us think we must do something, sometimes we do some very good things, but I'm afraid history suggests also we do some very bad things.
Yes. Perhaps we might invoke George Orwell and the idea of the thought police and thought crime. When society chooses to police actions like thieving and murder, then that's part of the law that we all understand. We should, all of us, be very, very worried when society starts to police thought. And that, of course, is what Stalin did and what Hitler did. So they were in the business of controlling people to the extent of actually imprisoning them, killing them, because of what they thought. Faith at its worst can do that. Faith at its best obviously can't. There is a sense in which the sort of rational discussing way of doing things, which is what we've been doing this morning, is, I believe, antithetical to faith, but is the kind of thing, and the faith that I believe it's antithetical to was the kind of thing that Stalin would have understood. Not that he was religious, but, or perhaps his early training as a seminarian might have given him the idea that controlling thought was the right kind of thing to do. And I think we should simply agree that thought police, in all that that implies, is deeply evil and deeply wicked and can have terrible consequences. And what we must try and do is to enter into reasoned discussion together.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Good. So now, these two other things are science and faith. Atheism has had its day. I do think that would be an important thing to say.
Okay.
And now I want to ask Richard a question.
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
okay. See, the thing about science and faith being that I can only go all that stuff about God being too complex and things. That's where I would come from.
I don't want to go over that in detail. I just want to. It's just as a question from from you in a quick answer as a way into that other discussion.
Okay.
Because that other discussion kind of came out quite in quite a loose way.
Okay.
Editing-wise, I need
Yes.
something that's quite
Okay.
punchy. So
You want something punchy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Soundbite type thing.
Yeah. Okay. Bit of moonshine back there. Okay. That's fine. Okay, and action.
Do you think science and faith are incompatible?
No, and I think the history of the whole interaction of science and religion shows that this idea there's perpetual warfare between them is simply historically unjustified. What you can show is at times they are in conflict and at times they work quite well together. And it seems to me that there's an obligation on all of us to try and make sure that they work together well in the future, as at times they have done in the past.
You've written that atheism is in decline, is in twilight. What do you mean by that? Why do you think that?
When I was researching a book called The Twilight of Atheism, one of the things I noticed is that its appeal is shaped largely by cultural factors. Where belief in God is seen to be a bad thing, atheism begins to flourish. We seem to be entering a phase in Western culture where that core belief seems to be eroded. There's a new interest in postmodern culture about spirituality. And what I see happening, and I don't say this makes it right or anything like that, what I see happening is people beginning to talk instead about spirituality instead of atheism. It's particularly evident amongst younger people, and that made me wonder, amongst many other things, whether atheism actually was beginning to lose the appeal it once had in a more modernist culture.
What about the sort of spirit